Texas Hill Country. May 1872, the sun stood high and angry over the dry dust of Cedar Bluff, and the air held that kind of heat that made a man feel like he was walking through breath. Levi O'Conner reined in his horse at the edge of the town square, his eyes drawn to the crowd gathering near the auction block like moths to flame. He had not planned to stop. He hated towns like this, too many men with lies in their mouths and knives behind their backs. But what he saw made his fingers tighten around the reins, and for a long moment he did not move. A young woman stood on the wooden platform, her dress torn at the hem, wrists bound in front of her with frayed rope. Her hair, thick and the color of wheat left too long in the sun, was tangled around her face. Her chin was high, proud despite the red mark on her cheek. She looked no older than 20, and there was a fury in her eyes that did not match the helplessness of her place. Two men stood beside her brothers, judging by the shared meanness in their mouths. One of them shouted, "A strong-bodied girl, good for work, good for whatever you need done." He laughed like he had not just stripped her of her dignity in front of half the town. Levi dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with purpose. He did not care what business had brought him this far east, not anymore. "What is this?" he asked a man leaning against a post. "Brothers selling off their daddy's debt," the man muttered. "Girl's their sister. She ain't got a choice in it." The one doing the bidding called out, "We start at $20. Levi did not think. He stepped forward, voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "I'll give you 50, and I want her unbound." The auctioneer hesitated. The brothers exchanged a look. "That ain't how this works," one of them, taller, meaner, snapped. "You do not get to step in like you own." "I said 50, Levi repeated, pulling the bills from his coat. "And I am not buying her. I am offering her my name." The crowd hushed. The girl's eyes snapped to his, wide and wary. "You asking to marry her?" someone called out. Levi did not look away from her. "Yes," one of the brothers spat. "You think you can come in here, and I think she deserves better than this," Levi said. "Let her decide." The girl blinked like she had not expected that. Her hands trembled where they were tied, and her mouth opened, then closed again. "You got a name?" Levi asked her gently. She nodded. "Willa Hale." "I am Levi O'Conner. I have a home west of here near Blanco. I raise cattle. I have no wife, but I will have one if you want that." "If you say yes." Her eyes filled, but not with tears, with disbelief, with something that looked like breath coming back after too long underwater. "I do not want to be sold," she said softly. "Then do not be," Levi said. "Say yes, and I will take you with me right now." One of the brothers lunged forward. "You cannot just." Willa turned on him, voice hard. "You sold off everything father left. You drank what you could not sell. You beat me when I begged you to stop, and now you want to break what is left of me. I would rather burn in hell than stay with you." She looked back at Levi. "Yes." He stepped up onto the platform and cut the ropes himself. Her wrists were raw from the bindings, and he took her hand carefully like she was something sacred. They did not wait for formal vows. They left Cedar Bluff behind before the dust could settle. Levi rode with her in front of him, one hand steady around her waist, the other on the reins. She did not speak for a long time, but she did not pull away. His cabin sat nestled in the hills, a modest two-room place with a porch that looked out over the valley. When they reached it, the sun was low, and the sky was burning orange. Willa stood at the edge of the porch and looked out at the land. She did not speak until the wind had cooled. "I thought I would die there," she said. "Or worse." "You are safe here," Levi said. "I swear that to you." She turned to him. "Why did you do it?" Levi's voice was low. "Because no one should be bought, because you looked like you deserved better. And maybe because I have been alone a long time and I saw something in you I could not walk away from." She stepped closer. There was space between them still, but not much. "You do not even know me." "I will," he said, "if you let me." She looked down at her hands. "My brothers, they used to say no one would ever want me, that I was too sharp, too stubborn." Levi reached out and gently lifted her chin. "I want you to be sharp. I want you to be stubborn. This is not a favor. I want a wife, not a shadow. If you choose to stay, I want all of you." Her breath caught. "I do not know how to be a wife." "We will figure it out together," he said, "one day at a time." She nodded slowly and then, without warning, leaned into him. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was something he had waited years to find. That night, she slept in the bed while he took the chair by the fire. In the quiet, she whispered his name once, soft as a prayer. And Levi O'Conner, who had never believed in fate, closed his eyes and smiled for the first time in years, knowing everything had just begun. Willa woke to birdsong and the scent of mesquite drifting through the open window. Her eyes opened slowly, the light unfamiliar, softer than any morning she could remember. The room was small, wood-planked and plain, but the quiet wrapped around her like a quilt. She sat up, fingers brushing the simple blanket, and listened for movement. The chair by the hearth was empty. She found Levi outside, crouched beside a trough, sleeves rolled to the elbow as he checked the water level. His shirt clung to his back with the work of the morning already behind him. When he turned and saw her standing in the doorway, he straightened, brushing his hands on his trousers. "You sleep all right," she nodded, then added, "Better than I thought I would." He gave her a short nod and turned to the barn. She followed without being asked. Inside, the cool shade held the scent of hay and leather. A few cows shifted lazily in their stalls, and a dun mare lifted her head as they passed. "I feed the stock at first light," Levi said. "Mornings move fast out here. I'll show you where everything is if you want that." "I do," Willa said. "I'm not afraid of work." "I didn't think you were." She paused near the mare's stall. "What's her name?" "Daisy. She's stubborn as a fence post and twice as smart." Willa reached through the slats and let the mare sniff her fingers. The horse nudged her gently. "She likes you?" Levi dropped a pitchfork into an empty stall and leaned on it. "You ever ride?" "Once. When I was little, my mother had a gelding. He died the winter after she did." Levi didn't speak, but she felt the shift in him, something quiet, not pity, more like shared understanding. "I'll teach you to ride proper," he said after a moment. "If you want that." She turned toward him. "I do." Later, they sat on the porch with tin mugs of coffee, watching the wind stir through the grass. Her hands were still dusty from sweeping the cabin floor, and his shirt was damp again from hauling water. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It had settled. "Your land," she said, eyes scanning the hills. "It's good, feels like it holds." He sipped his coffee. "Took me 6 years to buy it all. Another 2 to fence it. Wasn't much at first, just dirt and sky." "Why here?" "I was headed west from Arkansas, meant to go all the way to New Mexico. Stopped for a drink in Blanco and saw a hill that looked like it had bones. Something in me said stay." She nodded, letting the breeze lift her hair. "I can see that." He glanced at her, then looked down at his mug. "I meant what I said. I didn't bring you here to owe me, I know. I don't expect anything you're not ready to give. I know that too." She stood and stepped off the porch, walking to where a split-rail fence marked the edge of the yard. He followed a few paces behind. "My mother used to say we carry what we're handed until we find a place to set it down," she said. "I never found a place that would let me." "You think this might be one?" She turned, her face unreadable in the golden light. "I don't know yet. But I think it might." He didn't reach for her, didn't crowd the space between them. He just stood beside her, quiet as the land. She looked out again, voice low. "It's strange. I keep waiting for the ground to give." "It won't," he said. "Not here." She nodded once, and for a long while they stood without speaking, the afternoon stretching around them, vast and steady. That night she took the chair and left him the bed. He didn't argue. When the fire dimmed and the crickets hummed, she whispered toward the dark. "Do you mind if I stay?" His voice came from the blankets. "No." She closed her eyes, and this time when sleep came, it carried no fear with it. The rains came late that year. By the second week of June, the creek beds were still low, dust curling up underfoot with every step. Levi hitched the plow to the mule before first light, and spent the morning cutting rows into the hard ground behind the barn, while Willa worked in the garden near the porch, coaxing beans from dry soil with her hands and quiet focus. She didn't ask to rest, though the sun pressed hot against her back. She wore her hair braided down her neck now, not to look pretty, but to keep it from tangling while she worked. Dirt lined the creases of her palms, and her arms had begun to brown from the days spent under open sky. When Levi came up from the lower field near midday, she was standing by the fence with a tin pail of water, eyes narrowed toward the ridge. "You see something?" he asked, wiping his brow with the edge of his sleeve. "Smoke. Not much. Just past the sycamores." He shaded his eyes and followed her gaze. A faint thread of gray lifted where it shouldn't have. "That land's still open," he said. "Could be a hunter passing through." She didn't look convinced, or someone trying not to be seen. He studied her face. "You want me to ride out?" She hesitated. "I want to know who's near." "I'll take my rifle," he said. Back before sundown, she met his eyes. "I'll keep watch here." He saddled Daisy and rode out without lingering. Willa stood at the edge of the yard long after he disappeared into the trees, one hand resting loosely on the fence rail, her other arm wrapped around her middle as if to steady something inside herself. When Levi returned, the sun was low and the light had turned amber. His face was unreadable, but the rifle was still slung across his back, unfired. "Found a camp," he said as he dismounted. "Young man, maybe 16, just him and a dog. Said he's drifting west, looking for work. Did you believe him?" "I did." He loosened the saddle strap and gave Daisy a rub between the ears. "No firewood, just dry branches. He was hungry." Her voice was quiet. "You gave him something, biscuits and jerky. Told him to head toward Fredericksburg. There's a ranch they're always needing hands." She nodded once and turned toward the house. That night she was quiet through supper, but not distant. After the dishes were done, she lit a lamp and sat on the porch with a mending basket in her lap. Levi joined her after closing the chicken coop, easing into the chair beside hers. He watched the thread move through the cotton with practiced flicks of her wrist. "You always know what to do," he said. "No," she replied, not looking up. "I just let myself believe I can handle what comes." He leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath him. "That's more than most." She set the shirt aside, folding it neat along the seams. "I used to wonder what it would feel like to be safe enough to think past the next day. And now, I think I'm learning." The wind tugged at the edge of her sleeve. Levi watched her from the corner of his eye. "My mother was from Tennessee," he said after a pause. "She taught me to mend when I was small. My father didn't like that, said it'd make me soft." "Did it?" "No, but it made me careful. There's more strength in fixing what you've got than throwing it out." She glanced at him just once. "I never knew how to fix anything. I only knew how to survive it." He didn't answer right away. The silence between them filled with cicadas and the far-off yip of coyotes. "You're doing more than surviving now." She folded her hands in her lap. "Some days I still feel like I'm waiting for someone to yell, or take something. Or tell me I don't belong." Levi turned toward her, his voice low. "That won't come from me." She didn't speak, but her shoulders eased slightly. The lamp between them flickered as the wind shifted. Willa stood, walked down the steps, and looked out over the field where the corn stalks had just begun to push through. "You built all this," she said. "Every board, every fence, you worked for it." "So will you," he said gently. She turned, eyes meeting his. "I want to." There was no need for more. He stood, walked down to her, and when she didn't step back, he reached for her hand. This time she didn't flinch. "Come inside," she said. "You don't need to sleep in that chair anymore." He didn't move right away. "You sure?" She nodded. "I want you next to me." They crossed the threshold together. The door closed behind them with a soft click, not final but sure. The kind of sound made when something long unsettled finally found its place. By July, the heat settled low and constant over the hills, the kind that made tools hot to the touch and cattle slow to rise. Levi adjusted their work to the rhythm of the sun, rising earlier, resting through the harshest hours, returning to the fields once the shadows stretched long. Willa had taken to the land like she'd been born to it, not with ease but with steadiness. She planted late squash behind the shed and strung wire for the chickens without pause. He watched her sometimes, quiet and careful, learning how she moved through the day. She didn't speak often unless there was something worth saying, and he'd come to admire that restraint. One morning she came to the barn with a small bundle wrapped in cotton. She held it out to him. "For your shirt," she said, "the one with the torn cuff." I patched it proper. He took the bundle, unfolding it slowly. The stitching was tight and even the cloth clean. "You didn't have to," he said, "I know, but you wear it most days and I figured it was worth mending." He folded it again, slower this time. "Thank you." "I was thinking," she said, wiping her palms along her skirt, "we could plant tobacco along the back fence come spring. It'd grow well in that slope." "That your father's crop?" "No, my grandfather's, in Kentucky. I remembered how he cured it, hung it from rafters. I used to help string the leaves." He leaned against the stall door. "You miss that place?" "I miss the way it smelled after rain, and the sound of the frogs at night, but the rest of it no." She stepped closer, brushing hay from her sleeve. "You ever think about leaving this place?" He shook his head. "I've been places, none of them held like this one." She looked toward the pasture. "I think I understand that now." Later, they rode out to check the western fence line. Daisy's hooves moved steady beneath them as Willa sat tall in the saddle, her hands sure on the reins. She no longer needed guidance. She'd learned the land's shape, its moods. Levi dismounted near the back gate and crouched to examine a broken post. "Barbed wires sagging here," he said. "Stray might have pushed through." She slid down beside him. "We've got extra wire in the shed. I'll fix it in the morning." She touched the top rail, her fingers tracing the splintered wood. "I never thought I'd care about fences, or root rot. Or how much salt goes in the trough. You do now." "I do. It's strange." He stood slowly, brushing his hands on his trousers. "It's not strange, it means you've got something worth tending." She looked up at him. "I didn't expect to find that." "Not with a man I'd never met." He reached for her hand, dirt and all. "You did." That night she cooked corn and beans with bacon ends she traded for in Blanco. The air inside the cabin was warm but not stifling, the windows open to the night breeze. After supper, she sat on the floor near the hearth, sorting through a small tin of sewing needles, and he carved a length of wood into something that might one day be a spoon. "I found a letter in the drawer," she said. "From your sister. Labeled spring of '68, he nodded. "She wrote every few months after I left Arkansas. I kept the ones that didn't ask me to come back." "She still write?" "Not for a while. Last I heard she remarried. 2 boys. Lives near Hot Springs." Willa set the tin down softly. "Maybe you'd write her. Tell her about me." He looked at her, eyes steady. "I'd like that." She stood and crossed to him, kneeling beside the chair. "I want to be known, not just by you, but by someone who remembers where you came from." He touched her cheek, his calloused thumb brushing just beneath her eye. "Then I'll write her tomorrow." She leaned into his hand, breathing him in like he was already home. When they lay down that night, the space between them had vanished. She curled against him, her breath warm on his chest, and he rested his hand along the curve of her hip, holding her like something true. Outside, the cicadas sang low and steady, and the stars hung heavy above the hills, silent witnesses to 2 lives quietly stitching themselves together. August brought a dry wind that carried dust through the seams of the windows and left grit on the floorboards no matter how carefully Willa swept. The hills had yellowed, and the cattle gathered near the shaded corners of the pasture, moving only when they had to. Willa kept a wet cloth tucked behind her neck as she canned what she could from the last of the beans, the heat from the stove rising thick around her. Levi had begun work on the north fence, an older stretch they'd meant to replace come fall. He came in with blood on his knuckles and a cut above his eyebrow one evening, and she rose from the table before he could speak. "What happened?" "Caught a nail head just wrong." Spike kicked back. She dipped a cloth in the basin and pressed it gently to the scrape. He winced but didn't pull away. "You didn't think to stop." "I did after it bled in my eye." She pressed a clean strip of linen to the cut, tying it snug behind his head. "You're not made of iron, Levi." "I know it," he said, watching her face. "But this place runs on hands, not hope." "You've got both now," she said, brushing the hair back from his forehead. So let's not waste either. That night they sat outside on the porch without lamplight. The sky above them stretched wide and close, stars like chalk marks on dark slate. Willa leaned back against the post, her knees drawn up, her fingers absently tracing the grain of the wood beside her. Levi rested his arm along the top rail, his voice low. "You ever think about having a child?" She didn't answer right away. "I used to think I'd end up raising someone else's. My brother's girls, maybe, or one left behind. And now, I think I'd like it, with you," he nodded slowly. "The land could hold more. I could fence the lower ridge, bring in another bull next spring." She looked over at him, the corner of her mouth lifting just enough to soften her eyes. "Always thinking in head count and pasture. Only way I know how to plan." She shifted closer, her voice quieter. "Do you want to?" "I do," he said. "Not because it's expected. Because I want to see you raise something of your own." She curled into his side, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his hand resting where her collarbone met her shoulder. They stayed that way until the air turned cool enough to raise bumps along her arms. By early September, the beans had gone brittle and the corn stood tall, ready for harvest. Willa moved slower in the morning, her steps careful, her balance shifting as her body changed. She said little about it, only that she tired easier, and Levi adjusted their days without comment. He built a cradle from oak, sanding it smooth in the evenings. He didn't ask what colors she'd want, didn't suggest names. He just worked, steady as ever, and she watched with a kind of quiet reverence. She had not known the shape of safety until she saw it in the curve of his hands, smoothing the rim of the cradle he hadn't yet shown her. When the first autumn rain came, it brought a hush to the land. The dust settled, the hills deepened in color, and the scent of wet cedar crept through the windows. Willa stood at the porch rail with both hands resting over her belly, the sound of rain on the roof slowing the world around them. Levi came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. She leaned back into him. "This is the first time I've felt like I belong where I'm standing," she said. "You do," he said. "You always did. Just took a while to find the soil that could hold you." She turned in his arms and looked up at him, her voice soft. "I didn't expect to love you the way I do." He brushed her hair back behind her ear. "Same here." They didn't kiss often, not out of shyness, but because they didn't need to. But now she rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his, slow and sure. And he held her like a man who had never once doubted this was the life he'd been building toward. That winter passed with long days beside the stove, the cradle set near the hearth, and the sound of the wind moving through bare branches. Willa quilted slowly, her stitches careful, her breath steady. Levi added a window shutter and mended the roof before the frost deepened. They spoke little of what was coming in the spring. It was not a thing to be worried over, only waited for. The baby came on a cold morning in late March, while the creek still held ice along its banks. Levi boiled water and kept her hand in his through every contraction, his face drawn but calm. When the crying came, sharp and whole, Willa fell back against the pillows with tears on her cheeks and mud still on her boots from where she'd walked the pasture the day before. "It's a girl," Levi said, his voice breaking like a man who hadn't expected to feel so much all at once. Willa held the child against her chest, her fingers trembling as she traced the curve of a tiny ear. "She's strong," she whispered. "I can feel it." They named her Clara after no one in particular, just a name that felt like light through leaves. Years passed. They added another room to the cabin and a new well behind the barn. Clara grew tall and brown-eyed, with her mother's quiet focus and her father's steady hands. Willa taught her to write her name in the dust on the porch rail, and Levi showed her how to hold the reins without jerking. By the time Clara turned 5, the land was greener, the fences stronger, and the barn full with calves born of the bull Levi had brought in the spring after Willa first said yes. One evening, Clara sat between them on the porch, her head resting against Levi's leg as Willa braided the child's hair. "I want to build fences like Papa," Clara said. Willa looked up at Levi. "She'll probably do it better. Levi smiled. I expect she will. As the sun dipped below the hill, and the sky turned amber behind the ridge, Levi reached for Willa's hand and laced his fingers through hers. They had built a life from quiet choices and hard work, from trust earned one day at a time. And now, with the porch warm beneath their feet, their daughter safe between them, and the land holding firm beneath the dusk, there was nothing more they needed. They had come through every dark and every silence and found each other waiting on the other side. And they never had to be alone again.